It said there will be great signs and portents of his coming. I saw that you were from Shinar by your escort's armor, and you had the look of a wise one, so I thought you might have word of great events. The events that might herald him. A man. Baron's voice was soft, but her eyes were as sharp as daggers. What are these signs? Urian shook his head. It is said we will know them when we hear of them, as we will know him when we see him. For he will be marked. He will come from the west, beyond the spine of the world, but be of our blood. He will go to Raidian, and lead us out to the threefold land. He took a spear in his right hand. Leather and metal creaked as soldiers reached for their swords, and Perrin realized he had
disguised with draperies, with fabric paddings and rare art objects.
It is a certainty. They are dead.
The Baron shifted his gross body in the suspensors, focused his attention on an Ebeline statue of a leaping boy in a niche across the room. Sleep faded from him. He straightened the padded suspensor beneath the fat folds of his neck, stared across the single glow globe of his bedchamber to the doorway where Captain Nefud stood blocked by the pentashield.
They're certainly dead, Baron.
The Baron noted the trace of Semuta dullness in Nefud's eyes. It was obvious the man had been deep within the drug's rapture when he received this report, and had stopped only to take the antidote before rushing here.
I have a full report.
Let him sweat a little, the Baron thought. One must always keep the tools of statecraft sharp and ready. Power and fear, sharp and ready.
Have you seen their bodies? Well?
My lord, they were seen to dive into a sandstorm. Winds over 800 kilometers. Nothing survived such a storm, my lord. Nothing. One of our own craft was destroyed in the pursuit.
The Baron stared at Nefud, noting the nervous twitch in the scissors line of the man's jaw muscles, the way the chin moved as Nefud swallowed.
You have seen the bodies?
My lord?
For what purpose do you come here rattling your armor? To tell me a thing is certain when it is not? Do you think I'll praise you for such stupidity? Give you another promotion?
Nefud's face went bone pale. Look at that chicken, the Baron thought. I'm surrounded by such useless clods. If I scattered sand before this creature and told him it was grain, he'd peck at it.
The man Idaho led us to them, then?
Yes, my lord.
Look how he blurts out his answer, the Baron thought.
They were attempting to flee to the Fremen, eh?
Yes, my lord.
Is there more to this report?
The Imperial planetologist, Kynes, is involved, my lord. Idaho joined this Kynes under mysterious circumstances. I might even say suspicious circumstances.
So?
They, fled together to a place in the desert where it's apparent the boy and his mother were hiding. In the excitement of the chase, several of our groups were caught in a laser gun shield explosion.
How many did we lose?
I'm, not sure yet, my lord.
He's lying, the Baron thought. It must have been pretty bad.
The Imperial lackey, this Kynes. He was playing a double game, huh?
I'd stake my reputation on it, my lord.
His reputation, the Baron thought.
Have the man killed.
My lord, Kynes is the Imperial planetologist, His Majesty's own servant.
Make it look like an accident, then.
My lord, there was Sardaukar with our forces in the subjugation of this Fremen nest. They have Kynes in custody now.
Get him away from them. Say I wish to question him.
If they demur?
They will not if you handle it correctly.
Yes, my lord.
The man must die. He tried to help my enemies.
Nefud shifted from one foot to the other.
Well?
My lord, the Sardaukar have two persons in custody who might be of interest to you. They've caught the Duke's Master of Assassins.
Hawat? Thufir Hawat?
I've seen the captive myself, my lord. 'Tis Hawat.
I'd not have believed it possible.
They say he was knocked out by a stunner, my lord. In the desert where he couldn't use his shield, he's virtually unharmed. If we can get our hands on him, he'll provide great sport.
This is a mentat you speak of. One doesn't waste a mentat. Has he spoken? What does he say of his defeat? Could he know the extent of... but no.
He's spoken only enough, my lord, to reveal his belief that the Lady Jessica was his betrayer.
You're sure? It's the Lady Jessica who attracts his anger?
He said it in my presence, my lord.
Let him think she's alive, then.
But my lord...
Be quiet. I wish Howard treated kindly. He must be told nothing of the late Dr. Yui, his true betrayer. Let it be said that Dr. Yui died defending his duke. In a way, this may even be true. We will instead feed his suspicions against the Lady Jessica.
My lord, I don't...
The way to control and direct a Mentat, Nefud, is through his information. False information, false results.
Yes, my lord, but...
Is Howard hungry? Thirsty?
My lord, Howard's still in the hands of the Sardaukar.
Yes, indeed, yes. But the Sardaukar will be as anxious to get information from Hawat as I am. I've noticed a thing about our allies, Nefud. They're not very devious, politically. I do believe this is a deliberate thing. The Emperor wants it that way. Yes, I do believe it. You will remind the Sardaukar commander of my renown at obtaining information from reluctant subjects.
Yes, my lord.
You will tell the Sardaukar commander that I wish to question both Hawat and his Kynes at the same time, playing one off against the other. He can understand that much, I think.
Yes, my lord.
And once we have them in our hands...
My lord, the Sardaukar will want an observer with you during any questioning.
I'm sure we can produce an emergency to draw off any unwanted observers, Nefud.
I understand, my lord. That's when Kynes can have his accident.
Both Kynes and Hawat will have accidents then, Nefud. But only Kynes will have a real accident. It's Hawat I want. Yes. Ah, yes.
Nefud blinked, swallowed. He appeared about to ask a question, but remained silent.
Hawat will be given both food and drink, treated with kindness, with sympathy. In his water, you will administer the residual poison developed by the late Peter de Vries. And you will see that the antidote becomes a regular part of Hawat's diet from this point on, unless I say otherwise.
The antidote, yes, but...
Don't be dense, Nefud. The Duke almost killed me with that poison capsule tooth. The gas he exhaled into my presence deprived me of my most valuable Mentat. Peter, I need a replacement.
Hawat?
Hawat.
But...
You're going to say Hawat's completely loyal to the Atreides. True, but the Atreides are dead. We will woo him. He must be convinced he's not to blame for the Duke's demise. It was all the doing of that Bene Gesserit witch. He had an inferior master, one whose reason was clouded by emotion. Mentats admire the ability to calculate without emotion, Nefud. We will woo the formidable Thufir Hawat.
Woo him. Yes, my lord.
Hawat unfortunately had a master whose resources were poor, one who could not elevate a Mentat to the sublime peaks of reasoning that are on Mentat's right. Hawat will see a certain element of truth in this. The Duke couldn't afford the most efficient spies to provide his Mentat with the required information. Let us never deceive ourselves, Nefud. The truth is a powerful weapon. We know how we overwhelmed the Atreides. Hawat knows too. We did it with wealth.
With wealth. Yes, my lord.
We will woo Hawat. We will hide him from the Sardaukar. And we will hold in reserve the withdrawal of the antidote for the poison. There's no way of removing the residual poison. And Nefud, Hawat need never suspect. The antidote will not betray itself to a poison snooper. Hawat can scan his food as he pleases and detect no trace of poison.
Nefud's eyes opened wide with understanding.
The absence of a thing, this can be as deadly as the presence. The absence of air, the absence of water, the absence of anything else we're addicted to. You understand me, Nefud?
Yes, my lord.
Then get busy. Find the Sardaukar commander and set things in motion.
At once, my lord.
Nefud bowed, turned, and hurried away. Hawat by my side, the Baron thought. The Sardaukar will give him to me. If they suspect anything at all, it's that I wish to destroy the Mentat, and this suspicion I'll confirm. The fools. one of the most formidable mentats in all history. A mentat trained to kill, and they'll toss him to me like some silly toy to be broken. I will show them what use can be made of such a toy. The Baron reached beneath a drapery beside his suspensor bed, pressed a button to summon his older nephew, Raban. He sat back, smiling. And all the Atreides dead. The stupid guard captain had been right, of course. Certainly nothing survived in the path of a sandblast storm on Arrakis. Not an ornithopter or its occupants. The woman and the boy were dead. The bribes in the right places, the unthinkable expenditure to bring overwhelming military force down onto one planet, all the sly reports tailored for the Emperor's ears alone, all the careful scheming, were here at last coming to full fruition. Power and fear. Fear and power. The Baron could see the path ahead of him. One day, a Harkonnen would be Emperor. Not himself, and no spawn of his loins, but a Harkonnen. Not this Raban he'd summoned, of course, but Raban's younger brother, young Feyd-Rautha. There was a sharpness to the boy that the Baron enjoyed, a ferocity. A lovely boy, the Baron thought. A year or two more, say, by the time he's 17, I'll know for certain whether he's the tool that House Harkonnen requires to gain the throne.
My Lord Baron.
The man who stood outside the doorfield of the Baron's bedchamber was low-built, gross of face and body, with the Harkonnen paternal line's narrow-set eyes and bulge of shoulders. There was yet some rigidity in his fat, but it was obvious to the eye that he'd come one day to the portable suspensors for carrying his excess weight. A muscle-minded tank brain, the Baron thought. No mentat, my nephew. Not a pt.7, but perhaps something more precisely devised for the task at hand. If I give him freedom to do it, he'll grind over everything in his path. Oh, how he'll be hated here on Arrakis.
My dear Raban.
The Baron released the doorfield, but pointedly kept his body shield at full strength, knowing that the shimmer of it would be visible above the bedside globe.
You summoned me?
Raban stepped into the room, flicked a glance past the air disturbance of the body shield, searched for a suspensor chair, found none.
Stand closer where I can see you easily.
Raban advanced another step, thinking that the damnable old man had deliberately removed all chairs, forcing her to stand.
The Atreides are dead, the last of them. That's why I summoned you here to Arrakis. This planet is again yours.
But I thought you were going to advance pt.7 to the...
Piter too is dead.
Piter?
Piter.
The Baron reactivated the doorfield, bumped it against all energy penetration.
You finally tired of him, eh?
I will say a thing to you just this once. You insinuate that I obliterated Piter as one obliterates a trifle. Just like that, huh? I'm not so stupid, nephew. I will take it unkindly if ever again you suggest by word or action that I am so stupid.
Fear showed in the squinting of Raban's eyes. He knew within certain limits how far the old Baron would go against family, seldom to the point of death, unless there were outrageous profit or provocation in it. But family punishments could be painful.
Forgive me, my Lord Baron.
Raban lowered his eyes, as much to hide his own anger as to show subservience.
You do not fool me, Raban.
Raban kept his eyes lowered, swallowed.
I make a point. Never obliterate a man unthinkingly, the way an entire fief might do it through some due process of law. Always do it for an overriding purpose, and know your purpose.
But you obliterated the traitor Yui. I saw his body being carried out as I arrived last night.
Raban stared at his uncle, suddenly frightened by the sound of those words. But the Baron smiled.
I'm very careful about dangerous weapons. Dr. Yui was a traitor. He gave me the Duke. I suborned a doctor of the Suk school, the inner school. You hear, boy? But that's a wild sort of weapon to leave lying about. I didn't obliterate him casually.
Does the Emperor know you suborned a Suk doctor?
This was a penetrating question, the Baron thought. Have I misjudged this nephew?
The Emperor doesn't know it yet, but his Sardaukar are sure to report it to him. Before that happens, though, I'll have my own report in his hands, through Chom Company channels. I will explain that I luckily discovered a doctor who pretended to the conditioning. A false doctor, you understand? Since everyone knows you cannot counter the conditioning of a Suk school, this will be accepted.
I see.
And the Baron thought, indeed, I hope you do see. I hope you do see how vital it is that this remains secret. The Baron suddenly wondered at himself. Why did I do that? Why did I boast to this fool nephew of mine, the nephew I must use and discard? The Baron felt anger at himself. He felt betrayed.
It must be kept secret. I understand.
I give you different instructions about Arrakis this time, nephew. When last you ruled this place, I held you in strong reign. This time, I have only one requirement.
My lord.
Income.
Income?
Have you any idea, Raban, how much we spent to bring such military force to bear on the Atreides? Do you have even the first inkling of how much the Guild charges for military transport?
Expensive, eh?
Expensive?
The Baron shot a fat arm toward Raban.
If you squeeze Arrakis for every cent it can give us for 60 years, you'll just barely repay us.
Raban opened his mouth, closed it, without speaking.
Expensive? The damnable Guild monopoly on space would have ruined us if I hadn't planned for this expense long ago. You should know, Raban, that we bore the entire brunt of it. We even paid for transport of the Sardaukar.
And not for the first time, the Baron wondered if there ever would come a day when the Guild might be circumvented. They were insidious, bleeding off just enough to keep the host from objecting until they had you in their fist, where they could force you to pay and pay and pay. Always the exorbitant demands rode upon military ventures. Hazard rates, the oily Guild agents explained. And for every agent you managed to insert as a watchdog in the Guild bank structure, they put 2 agents into your system. Insufferable.
Income, then.
The Baron lowered his arm, made a fist.
You must squeeze.
And I may do anything I wish as long as I squeeze?
Anything.
The cannons you brought, could I...
I'm removing them.
But you...
You won't need such toys. They were a special innovation and are now useless. We need the metal. They cannot go against the shield, Raban. They were merely the unexpected. It was predictable that the Duke's men would retreat into cliff caves on this abominable planet. Our cannon merely sealed them in.
The Fremen don't use shields.
You may keep some laser guns if you wish.
Yes, my lord. And I have a free hand.
As long as you squeeze.
I understand perfectly, my lord.
You understand nothing perfectly. Let us have that clear at the outset. What you do understand is how to carry out my orders. Has it occurred to you, nephew, that there are at least 5 million persons on this planet?
Does my lord forget that I was his regent Siradar here before? And if my lord will forgive me, his estimate may be low. It's difficult to count a population scattered among sinks and pans the way they are here. And when you consider the Fremen of...
The Fremen aren't worth considering.
Forgive me, my lord, but the Sardaukar believe otherwise.
You know something?
My lord had retired when I arrived last night. I took the liberty of contacting some of my lieutenants from before. They've been acting as guides to the Sardaukar. They report that a Fremen band ambushed a Sardaukar force somewhere southeast of here and wiped it out.
Wiped out a Sardaukar force?
Yes, my lord.
Impossible. Fremen defeating Sardaukar?
I repeat only what was reported to me. It is said this Fremen force already had captured the Duke's redoubtable Thufir Hawat.
Ah.
I believe the report. You've no idea what a problem the Fremen were.
Perhaps, but these weren't Fremen your lieutenant saw. They must have been Atreides men trained by Howat and disguised as Fremen. It's the only possible answer.
Well, the Sardaukar think they were Fremen. The Sardaukar have already launched a program to wipe out all Fremen.
Good.
But
It'll keep the Sardaukar occupied. And we'll soon have Howat. I know it. I can feel it. Oh, this has been a day. The Sardaukar are hunting a few useless desert bands while we get the real prize.
Malone, I've always felt that we underestimate the Fremen, both in numbers and in...
Ignore them, boy. They're rabble. It's the populous towns, cities, and villages that concern us. A great many people there, eh?
A great many, my lord.
They worry me, Rabban.
Worry you?
Oh, 90% of them are of no concern, but there are always a few houses minor and so on. People of ambition who might try a dangerous thing. If one of them should get off Arrakis with an unpleasant story about what happened here, I'd be most displeased. Have you any idea how displeased I'd be?
Rabban swallowed.
You must take immediate measures to hold a hostage from each house minor. As far as anyone off Arrakis must learn, this was straightforward house-to-house battle. The Sardaukar had no part in it, you understand? The Duke was offered the usual quarter in exile, but he died in an unfortunate accident before he could accept. He was about to accept, though. That is the story. And any rumor that there were Sardaukar here, it must be laughed at.
As the Emperor wishes it.
As the Emperor wishes it.
What about the smugglers?
No one believes smugglers, Rabban.
Hey,
They are
420, how
tolerated
you
but not
doing?
believed. At any rate, you'll be spreading some
Let's
bribes
do
in
a
that
dab
quarter,
since you're here.
and taking other measures which I'm sure you can think of.
Yes, my lord.
2 things from Arrakis, then, Rabban. Income and a merciless fist. You must show no
How you
mercy
doing,
here.
executive
Think of these
session?
clods as what they are. Slaves envious of their masters and waiting only the opportunity to rebel. Not the slightest vestige of pity or mercy must you show them.
Can one exterminate an entire planet?
Exterminate? Who said anything about exterminating?
Well, I presumed you were going to bring in new stock, and...
I said squeeze, nephew, not exterminate. Don't waste the population. Merely drive them into utter submission. You must be the carnivore, my boy.
The Baron smiled, a baby's expression in the dimple-fat face.
A carnivore never stops. Show no mercy, never stop. Mercy is a chimera. It can be defeated by the stomach rumbling its hunger, by the throat crying its thirst. You must always be hungry and thirsty.
The Baron caressed his bulges beneath the suspensors.
Like me.
I see.
Rabban swung his gaze left and right.
It's all clear then, nephew?
Except for one thing. The planetologist, Kynes.
Ah, yes. Kynes.
He's the Emperor's man, my lord. He can come and go as he pleases. And he's very close to the Fremen. Married.
Kynes will be dead by tomorrow's nightfall.
That's dangerous work, Uncle. Killing an Imperial servant.
How do you think I've come this far this quickly? Besides, you need never have feared Kynes would leave Arrakis. You're forgetting that he's addicted to the spice.
Of course.
Those who know will do nothing to endanger their supply. Kynes certainly must know.
I forgot.
They stared at each other in silence.
Incidentally, you will make my own supply one of your first concerns. I've quite a stockpile of private stuff, but that suicide raid by the Duke's men got most of it stored for sale.
Yes, my lord.
He nodded, and the Baron brightened.
Now, tomorrow morning you will assemble what remains of organization here, and you'll say to them, "Our sublime Padishah Emperor has charged me to take possession of this planet and end all dispute."
I understand, my lord.
This time I'm sure you do. We will discuss the detail tomorrow. Now leave me to the
The Baron deactivated his door field, watched his nephew out of sight. A tank brain, the Baron thought. Muscle-minded tank brain. They will be bloody pulp here when he's through with them. Then, when I send in Fade Routher to take the load off them, they'll cheer their rescuer. Beloved Fade Routher, benign Fade Routher, the compassionate one who saves them from a beast. Fade Routher, a man to follow and die for. The boy will know by that time how to oppress with impunity. I'm sure he's the one. He was there. And such a lovely body. Really a lovely boy.
At the age of 15, he had already learned silence. From a child's history of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
As Paul fought the Thopter's controls, he grew aware that he was sorting out the interwoven storm forces, his more than mentat awareness computing on the basis of fractional minutiae. He felt dust fronts, billowings, mixings of turbulence, an occasional vortex. The cabin interior was an angry box lighted by the green radiance of instrument dials. The tan flow of dust outside appeared featureless, but his inner sense began to see through the curtain. I must find the right vortex, he thought. For a long time now he had sensed the storm's power diminishing, but still it shook them. He waited out another turbulence. The vortex began as an abrupt billowing that rattled the entire ship. Paul defied all fear to bank the Thopter left. Jessica saw the maneuver on the altitude globe. "Paul!" she screamed. The vortex turned them, twisting, tipping. It lifted the Thopter like a chip on a geyser, spewed them up and out, a winged speck within a core of winding dust lighted by the second moon. Paul looked down, saw the dust-defined pillar of hot wind that had disgorged them, saw the dying storm trailing away like a dry river into the desert, moon-grey motion growing smaller and smaller below as they rode the updraft. "We're out of it," Jessica whispered. Paul turned their craft away from the dust in swooping rhythm while he scanned the night sky. "We've given them the slip," he said. Jessica felt her heart pounding. She forced herself to calmness, looked at the diminishing storm. Her time sense said they had ridden within that compounding of elemental forces almost 4 hours, but part of her mind computed the passage as a lifetime. She felt reborn. It was like the litany, she thought. We faced it and did not resist. The storm passed through us and around us. It's gone, but we remain. "I don't like the sound of our wing motion," Paul said. "We suffered some damage in there." He felt the grating, injured flight through his hands on the controls. They were out of the storm, but still not out into the full view of his prescient vision. Yet they had escaped, and Paul sensed himself trembling on the verge of a revelation. He shivered. The sensation was magnetic and terrifying, and he found himself caught on the question of what caused this trembling awareness. Part of it, he felt, was the spice-saturated diet of Arrakis, but he thought part of it could be the litany, as though the words had a power of their own. I shall not fear. Cause and effect. He was alive despite malignant forces, and he felt himself poised on the brink of self-awareness that could not have been without the litany. Words from the orange-candle Bible rang through his memory. What senses do we lack, that we can see or hear another world all around us? There's rock all around, Jessica said. Paul, focused on the Thopter's launching, shook his head. He looked where his mother pointed, lifting rock shapes black on the sand ahead and to the right. He felt wind around his ankles, a stirring of dust in the cabin. There was a hole somewhere. More of the storm's doing. Better set us down on sand, Jessica said. The wings might not take full break. He nodded toward a place ahead where sand-plastered ridges lifted into moonlights above the dunes. I'll set us down near those rocks. Check your safety harness. She obeyed, thinking, we've water and still suits. If we can find food, we can survive a long time on this desert. Fremen live here. What they can do, we can do. Run for those rocks the instant we're stopped, Paul said. I'll take the path. Run for... She held nodded. Worms. Our friends, the worms, he corrected her. They'll get this thopter. There'll be no evidence of where we landed. How direct his thinking, she thought. They glided lower, lower. There came a rushing sense of motion to their passage, blurred shadows of dunes, rocks lifting like islands. The thopter touched a dune top with a soft lurch, skipped a sand valley, touched another. He's pulling more speed against the sand, Jessica thought, and permitted herself to admire his competence. Brace yourself, Paul warned. He pulled back on the wing brakes, gently at first, then harder and harder. He felt them cup the air, their aspect ratio dropping faster and faster. Wind screamed through the lapped coverts and primaries of the wing's leaves. Abruptly, with only the faintest lurch of warning, the left wing, weakened by the storm, twisted upward and in, slamming across the side of the thopter. The craft skidded across a dune top, twisting to the left. It tumbled down the opposite face to bury its nose in the next dune amid a cascade of sand.
Excuse me.
They lay, stopped on the broken wing side, the right wing pointing toward the stars. Paul jerked off his safety harness, hurled himself upward across his mother, wrenching the door open. Sand poured around them into the cabin, bringing a dry smell of burned flint. He grabbed the pack from the rear, saw that his mother was free of her harness. She stepped up onto the side of the right-hand seat and out onto the thopter's metal skin. Paul followed, dragging the pack by its straps. "Run!" he ordered. He pointed up the dune face and beyond it, where they could see a rock tower undercut by a sand-blast wind. Jessica leaped off the thopter and ran, scrambling and sliding up the dune. She heard Paul's panting progress behind. They came out onto a sand ridge that curved away toward the rocks. "Follow the ridge," Paul ordered. "It'll be faster." They slogged toward the rocks, sand gripping their feet. A new sound began to impress itself on them, a muted whisper, a hissing, an abrasive slithering. "Worm," Paul said. It grew louder. "Faster!" Paul gasped. The first rock shingle, like a beach slanting from the sand, lay no more than 10 meters ahead when they heard metal crunch and shatter behind them. Paul shifted his pack to his right arm, holding it by the straps. It slapped his side as he ran. He took his mother's arm with his other hand. They scrambled onto the lifting rock, up a pebble-littered surface, through a twisted, wind-carved channel. Breath came dry and gasping in their throats. "I can't run any farther," Jessica panted. Paul stopped, pressed her into a gut of rock, turned and looked down onto the desert. A mound in motion ran parallel to their rock island. Moonlit ripples, sand waves, a cresting burrow almost level with Paul's eyes at a distance of about a kilometer. The flattened dunes of its track curved once, a short loop crossing the patch of desert where they had abandoned their wrecked ornithopter. Where the worm had been, there was no sign of the aircraft. The burrow mound moved outward into the desert, coursed back across its own path, questing. "It's bigger than a guild spaceship," Paul whispered. "I was told worms grew large in the deep desert, but I didn't realize how big." "Nor I," Jessica breathed. Again the thing turned out away from the rocks, sped now with a curbing track toward the horizon. They listened until the sound of its passage was lost in gentle sand stirrings around them. Paul took a deep breath, looked up at the moon-frosted escarpment, and quoted from the Kitab al-Ibar. "Travel by night and rest in black shade through the day." He looked at his mother. "We still have a few hours of night. Can you go on?" "In a moment." Paul stepped out onto the rock shingle, shouldered the pack and adjusted its straps. He stood a moment with a paracompass in his hands. "Whenever you're ready," he said. She pushed herself away from the rock, feeling her
Hey,
strength
James
return.
Money, how you doing?
"Which direction?" "Where this
Good to
ridge
see
leads,"
you.
he pointed. "Deep into the desert," she said. "The Fremen Desert," Paul whispered. And he paused, shaken by the remembered high-relief imagery of a prescient vision he had experienced on Caladan. He had seen this desert, but the set of the vision had been subtly different, like an optical image that had disappeared into his consciousness, been absorbed by memory.
Yeah,
and
tomorrow
now
I should be able
failed at
to
perfect registry when
do some
projected
game
onto the real
streaming
scene.
tomorrow.
The vision appeared to have shifted and approached him from a different
And
angle
more
while
likely
he
it could
remained
be
motionless.
WWE.
Idaho was with us in the vision.
But we got internet
remember.
back.
But now Idaho is dead. Do you
I
see a
just
way
don't
to go?
have
Jessica asked.
my
mistaking his
PS5 in my
hesitation.
room yet.
No, he said. But we'll go anyway. He settled his shoulders more firmly in the pack, struck out up a sand-carved channel in the rock. The channel opened onto a moonlit floor of rock with benched ledges
it's
climbing
either
away
be
to the south.
WWE or it's
Paul
could be
headed for the
Assassin's
first
Creed.
ledge, clambered onto it. Jessica followed.
But I like
She noted
WWE
presently how their
time
passage
to
became a matter of the
do a little
immediate
smoke break
and
here and there.
particular. The sand pockets between rocks where their steps were slowed, the wind-carved ridge that cut their hands, the obstruction that forced a choice, go over or go around. The terrain enforced its own rhythms. They spoke only when necessary, and then with the hoarse
Or
voices of
sometimes
their exertion.
UFC. But I
Careful there.
primarily like
This ledge is slippery with sand.
WWE because
Watch you
I've
don't
always
hit your
been
head against this overhang.
a WWE
Stay below
fan
this
since I
ridge.
was a
The
kid.
moon's at our backs, and it'd show our movement to anyone out there. Paul stopped in a bight of rock, leaned the pack against a narrow ledge. Jessica leaned beside him, thankful for the moment of rest. She heard Paul
Hey,
pulling at
James
his
Money, if you're
stillsuit
still
tube,
here,
sipped her own
since
reclaimed water.
you're a wrestling
It
fan,
tasted brackish,
I got this.
and she
Look at
remembered
this.
the waters of Caladan, a tall fountain enclosing a
The
curve
old,
of sky, such a
pillow ones.
richness of moisture that it hadn't been noticed for itself, only for its shape, or its reflection, or its sound as she stopped beside it. To stop, she thought, to rest, truly rest. It occurred to her that mercy was the ability to stop, if only for a moment. There was no mercy where there could be no stopping. Paul pushed away from the rock ledge, turned and climbed over a sloping surface. Jessica followed with a sigh. They slid down onto a wide shelf that led around a sheer rock face. Again they fell into the disjointed rhythm of movement across this broken land. Jessica felt that the night was dominated by degrees of smallness in substances beneath their feet and hands. Boulders, or pea gravel, or flaked rock, or pea sand, or sand itself, or grit, or dust, or gossamer powder. The powder clogged nose filters and had to be blown out. Pea sand and pea gravel rolled on a hard surface and could spill the unwary. Rock flakes cut, and the omnipresent sand patches dragged against their feet. Paul stopped abruptly on a rock shelf, steadied his mother as she stumbled into him. He was pointing left, and she looked along his arm to see that they stood atop a cliff with the desert stretched out like a static ocean some 200 meters below. It lay there full of moon-silvered waves, shadows of angles that lapsed into curves, and, in the distance, lifted to the misty grey blur of another escarpment. "Open desert," she said. "A wide place to cross," Paul said, and his voice was muffled by the filter trap across his face. Jessica glanced left and right. Nothing but sand below. Paul stared straight ahead across the open dunes, watching the movement of shadows in the moon's passage. "About 3 or 4 kilometers across," he said. "Worms?" she said. "Sure to be." She focused on her weariness, the muscle ache that dulled her senses. "Shall we rest and eat?" Paul slipped out of the pack, sat down and leaned against it. Jessica supported herself by a hand on his shoulder as she sank to the rock beside him. She felt Paul turn as she settled herself, heard him scrabbling in the pack. "Here," he said. His hand felt dry against hers as he pressed 2 energy capsules into her palm. She swallowed them with a grudging spit of water from her stillsuit tube. "Drink all your water," Paul said. "Axiom. The best place to conserve your water is in your body. It keeps your energy up. You're stronger. Trust your still suit. She obeyed, drained her catch pockets, feeling energy return. She thought then how peaceful it was here in this moment of their tiredness. And she recalled once hearing the minstrel warrior Gurney Halleck say, "Better a dry morsel and quietness therewith than a house full of sacrifice and strife." Jessica repeated the words to Paul. "That was Gurney," he said. She caught the tone of his voice, the way he spoke as of someone dead, thought, and well, poor Gurney might be dead. The Atreides' forces were either dead or captive, or lost like themselves in this waterless void. "And he always had the right quotation," Paul said. "I can hear him now. And I will make the rivers dry, and sell the land into the hand of the wicked. And I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers." Jessica closed her eyes, found herself moved close to tears by the pathos in her son's voice. Presently, Paul said, "How do you feel?" She recognized that his question was directed at her pregnancy, said, "Your sister won't be born for many months yet. I still feel physically adequate." And she thought, how stiffly formal I speak to my own son. Then, because it was the Bene Gesserit way to seek within for the answer to such an oddity, she searched and found the source of her formality. "I'm afraid of my son. I fear his strangeness. I fear what he may see ahead of us, what he may tell me." Paul pulled his hood down over his eyes, listened to the bug-hustling sounds of the night. His lungs were charged with his own silence. His nose itched. He rubbed it, removed the filter, and grew conscious of the rich smell of cinnamon. "There's melange spice nearby," he said. An Ido wind feathered Paul's cheeks, ruffled the folds of his burnous. But this wind carried no threat of storm. Already he could sense the difference. "Dawn soon," he said. Jessica nodded. "There's a way to get safely across that open sand," Paul said. "The Fremen do it." "The worms?" "If we were to plant a thumper from our Frem kit back in the rocks here," Paul said, "it'd keep a worm occupied for a time." She glanced at the stretch of moonlighted desert between them and the other escarpment. 4 kilometers worth of time? Perhaps. And if we crossed there making only natural sounds, the kind that don't attract the worms. Paul studied the open desert, questing in his prescient memory, probing the mysterious allusions to thumpers and maker hooks in the Fremkit manual that had come with their escape pack. He found it odd that all he sensed was pervasive terror at thought of the worms. He knew, as though it lay just at the edge of his awareness, that the worms were to be respected and not feared. If... He shook his head. "It'd have to be sounds without rhythm," Jessica said. "What?" "Oh, yes. If we broke our steps, the sand itself must shift down at times. Worms can't investigate every little sound. We should be fully rested before we try it, though." He looked across at that other rock wall, seeing the passage of time in the vertical moon shadows there. "It'll be dawn within the hour." "Where'll we spend the day?" she asked. Paul turned left, pointed. "The cliff curves back north over there. You can see by the way it's wind cut, that's the windward face. There'll be crevices there, deep ones." "Had we better get started?" she asked. He stood, helped her to her feet. "Are you rested enough for a climb down? I want to get as close as possible to the desert floor before we camp." "Enough." She nodded for him to lead the way. He hesitated, then lifted the pack, settled it onto his shoulders and turned along the cliff. If only we had suspensors, Jessica thought. It'll be such a simple matter to jump down there. But perhaps suspensors are another thing to avoid in the open desert. Maybe they attract the worms the way a shield does. They came to a series of shelves dropping down, and beyond them, saw a fissure with its ledge outlined by moon shadow leading along the vestibule. Paul led the way down, moving cautiously but hurrying because it was obvious the moonlight could not last much longer. They wound down into a world of deeper and deeper shadows. Hints of rock shape climbed to the stars around them. The fissure narrowed to some 10 meters width at the brink of a dim, grey sand slope that slanted downward into darkness. "Can we go down?" Jessica whispered. "I think so." He tested the surface with one foot. "We can slide down," he said. "I'll go first. Wait until you hear me stop." "Careful," she said. He stepped onto the slope and slid and slipped down its soft surface onto an almost level floor of packed sand. The place was deep within the rock walls. There came the sound of sand sliding behind him. He tried to see up the slope in the darkness, was almost knocked over by the cascade. It trailed away to silence. "Mother?" he said. There was no answer. "Mother?" He dropped the pack, hurled himself up the slope, scrambling, digging, throwing sand like a wild man. "Mother!" he gasped. "Mother, where are you?" Another cascade of sand swept down on him, burying him to the hips. He wrenched himself out of it. "She's been caught in the landslide," he thought, "buried in it. I must be calm and work this out carefully. She won't smother immediately. She'll compose herself in Bindu suspension to reduce her oxygen needs. She knows I'll dig for her." In the Bene Gesserit way she had taught him, Paul stilled the savage beating of his heart, set his mind as a blank slate upon which the past few moments could write themselves. Every partial shift and twist of the slide replayed itself in his memory, moving with an interior stateliness that contrasted with the fractional second of real time required for the total recall. Presently, Paul moved slantwise up the slope, probing cautiously until he found the wall of the fissure, an outcurve of rock there. He began to dig, moving the sand with care not to dislodge another slide. A piece of fabric came under his hands. He followed it, found an arm. Gently he traced the arm, exposed her face. "Do you hear me?" he whispered. No answer. He dug faster, freed her shoulders. She was limp beneath his hands, but he detected a slow heartbeat. "Bindu suspension," he told himself. He cleared the sand away to her waist, draped her arms over his shoulders and pulled down slope, slowly at first, then dragging her as fast as he could, feeling the sand give way above. Faster and faster he pulled her, gasping with the effort, fighting to keep his balance. He was out on the hard-packed floor of the fissure then, swinging her to his shoulder and breaking into a staggering run, as the entire sand slope came down with a loud hiss that echoed and was magnified within the rock walls. He stopped at the end of the fissure where it looked out on the desert's marching dunes some 30 meters below. Gently, he lowered her to the sand, uttered the word to bring her out of the catalepsis. She awakened slowly, taking deeper and deeper breaths. "I knew you'd find me," she whispered. He looked back up the fissure. "It might have been kinder if I hadn't." "Paul!" "I lost the pack," he said. "It's buried under 100 tons of sand, at least. Everything. The spare water, the still tent, everything that counts." He touched a pocket. "I still have the paracampus." He fumbled at the waist sash. "Knife and binoculars. We can get a good look around the place where we'll die." In that instant, the sun lifted above the horizon somewhere to the left, beyond the end of the fissure. Colors blinked in the sand out on the open desert. A chorus of birds held forth their songs from hidden places among the rocks. But Jessica had eyes only for the despair in Paul's face. She edged her voice with scorn, said, "Is this the way you were taught? Don't you understand?" he asked. "Everything we need to survive in this place is under that sand." "You found me," she said. And now her voice was soft, reasonable. Paul squatted back on his heels. Presently, he looked up the fissure at the new slope, studying it, marking the looseness of the sand. If we could immobilize a small area of that slope and the upper face of a hole dug into the sand, we might be able to put down a shaft to the pack. Water might do it, but we don't have enough water for... He broke off. Then, foam. Jessica held herself to stillness lest she disturb the hyper-functioning of his mind. Paul looked out at the open dunes, searching with his nostrils as well as his eyes, finding the direction and then centering his attention on a darkened patch of sand below them. Spice, he said. Its essence highly alkaline. And I have the paracompass. Its power pack is acid base. Jessica sat up straight against the rock. Paul ignored her, leaping to his feet, and was off down the wind-compacted surface that spilled from the end of the fissure to the desert's floor. She watched the way he
Right
walked,
back.
breaking his stride. Step, pause. Step, step, slide, pause. There was no rhythm to it that might tell a marauding worm something not of the desert moved here. Paul reached the spice patch, shoveled a mound of it into a fold of his robe, returned to the fissure. He spilled the spice onto the sand in front of Jessica, squatted and began dismantling the paracompass, using the point of his knife. The compass face came off. He removed his sash, spread the compass parts on it, lifted out the power pack. The dial mechanism came out next, leaving an empty, dished compartment in the instrument. "You'll need water," Jessica said. Paul took the catch tube from his neck, sucked up a mouthful, expelled it into the dished compartment. If this fails, that's water wasted, Jessica thought. But it won't matter then anyway. With his knife, Paul cut open the power pack, spilled its crystals into the water. They foamed slightly, subsided. Jessica's eyes caught motion above them. She looked up to see a line of hawks along the rim of the fissure. They perched there, staring down at the open water. Great Mother, she thought. They can sense water even at that distance. Paul had the cover back on the paracompass, leaving off the reset button, which gave a small hole into the liquid. Taking the reworked instrument in one hand, a handful of spice in the other, Paul went back up the fissure, studying the lay of the slope. His robe billowed gently without the sash to hold it. He waded part way up the slope, kicking off the sand rivulets, spurts of dust. Presently he stopped, pressed a pinch of the spice into the paracompass, shook the instrument case. Green foam boiled out of the hole where the reset button had been. Paul aimed it at the slope, spread a low dike there, began kicking away the sand beneath it, immobilizing the opened face with more foam. Jessica moved to a position below him, called out, "May I help?" "Come up and dig," he said. "We've about 3 meters to go. It's going to be a near thing." As he spoke, the foam stopped billowing from the instrument. "Quickly," Paul said. "No telling how long this foam will hold the sand." Jessica scrambled up beside Paul as he sifted another pinch of spice into the hole, shook the paracompass case. Again, foam boiled from it. As Paul directed the foam barrier, Jessica dug with her hands, hurling the sand down the slope. "How deep?" she panted. "About 3 meters," he said, "and I can only approximate the position. We may have to widen this hole." He moved a step aside, slipping in loose sand. "Slant your digging backward. Don't go straight down." Jessica obeyed. Slowly the hole went down, reaching a level even with the floor of the basin, and still no sign of the pack. Could I have miscalculated? Paul asked himself. I'm the one that panicked originally and caused this mistake. Has that warped my ability? He looked at the paracompass. Less than 2 ounces of the acid infusion remained. Jessica straightened in the hole, rubbed a foam-stained hand across her cheek. Her eyes met Paul's. "The upper face," Paul said. "Gently now." He added another pinch of spice to the container, sent the foam boiling around Jessica's hands as she began cutting a vertical face in the upper slant of the hole. On the second pass, her hands encountered something hard. Slowly, she worked out a length of strap with a plastic buckle. "Don't move any more of it," Paul said, and his voice was almost a whisper. "We're out of foam." Jessica held the strap in one hand, looked up at him. Paul threw the empty paracampus down onto the floor of the basin and said, "Give me your other hand. Now listen carefully. I'm going to pull you to the side and downhill. Don't let go of that strap. We won't get much more spill from the top. This slope has stabilized itself. All I'm going to aim for is to keep your head free of the sand. Once that hole's filled, we can dig you out and pull up the pack." "I understand," she said. "Ready?" "Ready." She tensed her fingers on the strap. With one surge, Paul had her half out of the hole, holding her head up as the foam barrier gave way and sand spilled down. When it had subsided, Jessica remained buried to the waist, her left arm and shoulder still under the sand, her chin protected on a fold of Paul's robe. Her shoulder ached from the strain put on it. "I still have the strap," she said. Slowly, Paul worked his hand into the sand beside her, found the strap. "Together," he said. "Steady pressure. We mustn't break it." More sand spilled down as they worked the pack up. When the strap cleared the surface, Paul stopped, freed his mother from the sand. Together then they pulled the pack downslope and out of its trap. In a few minutes they stood on the floor of the fissure, holding the pack between them. Paul looked at his mother. Foam strained her face, her robe. Sand was caked to her where the foam had dried. She looked as though she had been a target for balls of wet, green sand. "You look a mess," he said. "You're not so pretty yourself," she said. They started to laugh, then sobered. "That shouldn't have happened," Paul said. "I was careless." She shrugged, feeling caked sand fall away from her robe. "I'll put up the tent," he said. "Better slip off that robe and shake it out." He turned away, taking the pack. Jessica nodded, suddenly too tired to answer. "There's anchor holes in the rock," Paul said. "Someone's tented here before." Why not? She thought, as she brushed at her robe. This was a likely place, deep in rock walls and facing another cliff some 4 kilometers away, far enough above the desert to avoid worms, but close enough for easy access before a crossing. She turned, seeing that Paul had the tent up, its rib-domed hemisphere blending with the rock walls of the fissure. Paul stepped past her, lifting his binoculars. He adjusted their internal pressure with a quick twist, focused the oil lenses on the other cliff, lifting golden tan in morning light across open sand. Jessica watched as he studied that apocalyptic landscape, his eyes probing into sand rivers and canyons. "There are growing things over there," he said. Jessica found the spare binoculars in the pack beside the tent, moved up beside Paul. "There," he said, holding the binoculars with one hand and pointing with the other. She looked where he pointed. "Saguaro," she said. "Scrawny stuff." "There may be people nearby," Paul said. "That could be the remains of a botanical testing station," she warned. "This is pretty far south into the desert," he said. He lowered his binoculars, rubbed beneath his filter baffle, feeling how dry and chapped his lips were, sensing the dusty taste of thirst in his mouth. "This has the feeling of a Fremen place," he said. "Are we certain the Fremen will be friendly?" she asked. "Kynes promised their help." "But there's desperation in the people of this desert," she thought. "I felt some of it myself today. Desperate people might kill us for our water." She closed her eyes and, against this wasteland, conjured in her mind a scene from Caladan. There had been a vacation trip once on Caladan, she and the Duke Leto before Paul's birth. They'd flown over the southern jungles, above the weed-wild shouting leaves and rice paddies of the deltas. and they had seen the ant lines in the greenery, man gangs carrying their loads on suspensor-buoyed shoulder poles. And in the sea reaches there had been the white petals of trimaran dhows. All of it gone. Jessica opened her eyes to the desert stillness, to the mounting warmth of the day. Restless heat devils were beginning to set the air a-quiver out on the open sand. The other rock face across from them was like a thing seen through cheap glass. A spill of sand spread its brief curtain across the open end of the fissure. The sand hissed down, loosed by puffs of morning breeze, by the hawks that were beginning to lift away from the cliff top. When the sandfall was gone, she still heard it hissing. It grew louder, a sound that, once heard, was never forgotten. "Worm," Paul whispered. It came from their right with an uncaring majesty that could not be ignored. A twisting, burrow mound of sand cut through the dunes within their field of vision. The mound lifted in front, dusting away like a bow wave in water. Then it was gone, coursing off to the left. The sound diminished, died. "I've seen space frigates that were smaller," Paul whispered. She nodded, continuing to stare across the desert. Where the worm had passed, there remained that tantalizing gap. It flowed bitterly endless before them, beckoning beneath its horizontal collapse of skyline. "When we've rested," Jessica said, "we should continue with your lessons." He suppressed a sudden anger, said, "Mother, don't you think we could do without—" "Today you panicked," she said. "You know your mind and Bindu nervature perhaps better than I do, but you've much yet to learn about your body's prana musculature. The body does things of itself sometimes, Paul, and I can teach you about this. You must learn to control every muscle, every fiber of your body. You need review of the hands. We'll start with finger muscles, palm tendons, and tip sensitivity." She turned away. "Come into the tent now." He flexed the fingers of his left hand, watching her crawl through the sphincter valve, knowing that he could not deflect her from this determination, that he must agree. "Whatever has been done to me, I've been a party to it," he thought. Review of the hand. He looked at his hand. How inadequate it appeared when measured against such creatures as that worm.
We came from Caladan, a paradise world for our form of life. There existed no need on Caladan to build a physical paradise, or a paradise of the mind. We could see the actuality all around us. And the price we paid was the price men have always paid for achieving a paradise in this life. We went soft. We lost our edge. From Muad'Dib, Conversations by the Princess Irulan.
"So you're the great Gurney Halleck," the man said. Halleck stood staring across the round cavern office at the smuggler seated behind a metal desk. The man wore Fremen robes and had half-tint blue eyes that told of off-planet foods in his diet. The office duplicated a space frigate's master control center, communications and view screens along a 30-degree arc of wall, remote arming and firing banks adjoining, and the desk formed as a wall projection, part of the remaining curve. "I am Steben Tuick, son of Esmar Tuick," the smuggler said. "Then you're the one I owe thanks for the help we've received," Halleck said. "Ah, gratitude," the smuggler said. "Sit down." A ship-type bucket seat emerged from the wall beside the screens, and Halleck sank onto it with a sigh, feeling his weariness. He could see his own reflection now in the dark surface beside the smuggler, and scowled at the lines of fatigue in his lumpy face. The ink vine scar along his jaw writhed with the scowl. Halleck turned from his reflection, stared at Tuick. He saw the family resemblance in the smuggler now, the father's heavy, overhanging eyebrows and rock planes of cheeks and nose. "Your men tell me your father is dead, killed by the Harkonnens," Halleck said. "By the Harkonnens, or by a traitor among your people?" Tuick said. Anger overcame part of Halleck's fatigue. He straightened, said, "Can you name the traitor?" "We are not sure. Thufir Hawat suspected the Lady Jessica." "Ah, the Bene Gesserit witch, perhaps. But Hawat is now a Harkonnen captive." "I heard." Halleck took a deep breath. "It appears we've a deal more killing ahead of us." "We will do nothing to attract attention to us," Tuek said. Halleck stiffened. "But you and those of your men we've saved are welcome to sanctuary among us," Tuek said. "You speak of gratitude. Very well. Work off your debt to us. We can always use good men. We'll destroy you out of hand, though, if you make the slightest open move against the Harkonnens." "But they killed your father, men. Perhaps. And if so, I'll give you my father's answer to those who act without thinking. A stone is heavy, and the sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than them both." "You mean to do nothing about it, then?" Halleck sneered. "You did not hear me say that. I merely say I will protect our contract with the Guild. The Guild requires that we play a circumspect game. There are other ways of destroying a foe." Ah, indeed. If you've a mind to seek out the witch, have at it. But I warn you that you are probably too late, and we doubt she's the one you want anyway. Hawat made few mistakes. He allowed himself to fall into Harkonnen hands. You think he's the traitor?" Tuek shrugged. "This is academic. We think the witch is dead. At least the Harkonnens believe it. You seem to know a great deal about the Harkonnens. Hints and suggestions, rumors and hunches." "We are 74 men," Halleck said. "If you seriously wish us to enlist with you, you must believe our Duke is dead. His body has been seen. And the boy too? Young Master Paul?" Halleck tried to swallow, found a lump in his throat. "According to the last word we had, he was lost with his mother in the desert storm. Likely not even their bones will ever be found." "So the witch is dead, then?" "All dead." Tuek nodded. "And Beast Rabban, so they say, will sit once more in the seat of power here on Dune." "The Count Rabban of Lankavale?" "Yes." It took Halleck a moment to put down the upsurge of rage that threatened to overcome him. He spoke with panting breath. "I've a score of my own against Rabban. I owe him for the lives of my family." He rubbed at the scar along his jaw. "And for this." "One does not risk everything to settle a score prematurely," Tuek said. He frowned, watching the play of muscles along Halleck's jaw, the sudden withdrawal in the man's shed-lidded eyes. I know. Halleck took a deep breath. "You and your men can work out your passage off Arrakis by serving with us. There are many places to—" "I release my men from any bond to me. They can choose for themselves. With Rabban here, I stay." "In your mood, I'm not sure we want you to stay." Halleck stared at the smuggler. "You doubt my word?" "No." "You've saved me from the Harkonnens. I gave loyalty to the Duke later for no greater reason. I'll stay on Arrakis, with you, or with the Fremen. Whether a thought is spoken or not, it is a real thing, and it has power," Tuek said. "You might find the line between life and death among the Fremen to be too sharp and quick." Halleck closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weariness surge up in him. "Where is the Lord who led us through the land of deserts and of pits?" he murmured. "Move slowly and the day of your revenge will come," Tuek said. "Speed is a device of Shaitan. Cool your sorrow. We've the diversions for it. 3 things there are that ease the heart: water, green grass, and the beauty of woman." Halleck opened his eyes. "I would prefer the blood of Rabban Harkonnen flowing about my feet." He stared at Tuek. "You think that day will come?" "I have little to do with how you'll meet tomorrow, Gurney Halleck. I can only help you meet today. Then I'll accept that help and stay until the day you tell me to revenge your father and all the others who—" Listen to me, fighting man, Tuick said. He leaned forward over his desk, his shoulders level with his ears, eyes intent. The smuggler's face was suddenly like weathered stone. My father's water, I'll buy that back myself, with my own blade. Halleck stared back at Tuick. In that moment, the smuggler reminded him of Duke Leto, a leader of men, courageous, secure in his own position and his own course. He was like the Duke, before Arrakis. Do you wish my blade beside you? Halleck asked. Tuick sat back, relaxed, studying Halleck silently. Do you think of me as fighting man? Halleck pressed. You're the only one of the Duke's lieutenants to escape, Tuick said. Your enemy was overwhelming, yet you rolled with him. You defeated him the way we defeat Arrakis. Eh? We live on sufferance down here, Gurney Halleck, Tuick said. Arrakis is our enemy. One enemy at a time, is that it? That's it. Is that the way the Fremen make out? Perhaps? You said I might find life with the Fremen too tough. They live in the desert, in the open. Is that why? Who knows where the Fremen live? For us, the Central Plateau is a no-man's land. But I wish to talk more about... I'm told that the guild seldom routes spice lighters in over the desert, Halleck said. But there are rumors that you can see bits of greenery here and there, if you know where to look. Rumors, Tuick sneered. Do you wish to choose now between me and the Fremen? We have a measure of security, our own sietch carved out of the rock, our own hidden basins. We live the lives of civilized men. The Fremen are a few ragged bands that we use as spice hunters. But they can kill Harkonnens. And do you wish to know the result? Even now they are being hunted down like animals with laser guns because they have no shields. They are being exterminated. Why? Because they killed Harkonnens. Was it Harkonnens they killed? Halleck asked. What do you mean? Haven't you heard that there may have been Sardaukar with the Harkonnens? More rumors. But a pogrom, that isn't like the Harkonnens. A pogrom is wasteful. I believe what I see with my own eyes, Tuick said. Make your choice, fighting man, me or the Fremen. I will promise you sanctuary and a chance to draw the blood we both want. Be sure of that. The Fremen will offer you only the life of the hunted. Halleck hesitated, sensing wisdom and sympathy in Tuick's words, yet troubled for no reason he could explain. Trust your own abilities, Tuick said. Whose decisions brought your force through the battle? Yours. Decide. It must be, Halleck said. The Duke and his son are dead. The Harkonnens believe it. Where such things are concerned, I incline to trust the Harkonnens. A grim smile touched Tuick's mouth. But it's about the only trust I give them. Then it must be, Halleck repeated. He held out his right hand, palm up and thumb folded flat against it in the traditional gesture. I'll give you my sword. Accepted. Do you wish me to persuade my men? You'd let them make their own decision? They've followed me this far, but most are Caladan-born. Arrakis isn't what they thought it'd be. Here they've lost everything except their lives. I prefer they decided for themselves now. Now is no time for you to falter, Tuick said. They've followed you this far. You need them. Is that it? We can always use experienced fighting men, in these times more than ever. You've accepted my sword. Do you wish me to persuade them? I think they'll follow you, Gurney Halleck. 'Tis to be hoped. Indeed. I may make my own decision in this, then. Your own decision. Halleck pushed himself up from the bucket seat, feeling how much of his reserve strength even that small effort required. For now, I'll see to their quarters and well-being, he said. Consult my quartermaster, Tuick said. Drisk is his name. Tell him it's my wish that you receive every courtesy. I'll join you myself presently. I've some off-shipments of spice to see to first. Fortune passes everywhere, Halleck said. Everywhere, Tuig said. A time of upset is a rare opportunity for our business. Halleck nodded, heard the faint susurration, and felt
Hey,
the
Noda,
air
how you
shift
doing?
as a lock port swung open.
I'm not
beside
doing
him.
too bad. Can't
He
complain.
turned, ducked through it,
Well, I can,
and out
but
of the office.
you know how that works.
He found himself in the assembly hall through which he and his men had been led by Tuig's aides.
Hope
It
you're
was a
doing
long,
well,
fairly
too.
narrow area, chewed out of the native rock, its smooth surface betraying the use of cut-ray burners for the job. The ceiling stretched away high enough to continue the natural supporting curve of the rock, and to permit internal air convection currents. Weapons racks and lockers lined the walls. Halleck noted with a touch of pride that those of his men still able to stand were standing, no relaxation in weariness and defeat for them. Smuggler medics were moving among them, tending the wounded. Litter cases were assembled in one area down to the left, each wounded man with an Atreides companion. The Atreides training. We care for our own. It held like a core of native rock in them, Halleck noted. One of his lieutenants stepped forward, carrying Halleck's 9-string balisette out of its case. The man snapped to salute, said, "Sir, the medics here say there's no hope for Matai. They have no bone and organ banks here, only outpost medicine. Matai can't last, they say. And he has a request of you." "What is it?" The lieutenant thrust the balisette forward. "Matai wants a song to ease his going, sir. He says you'll know the one. He's asked it of you often enough." The lieutenant swallowed. "It's the one called My Woman, sir. If you... I know." Halleck took the balisette, flicked the multi-pick out of its catch on the fingerboard. He drew a soft chord from the instrument, found that someone had already tuned it. There was a burning in his eyes, but he drove that out of his thoughts as he strolled forward, strumming the tune, forcing himself to smile casually. Several of his men and a smuggler medic were bent over one of the litters. One of the men began singing softly as Halleck approached, catching the counter beat with the ease of long familiarity. My woman stands at her window, curved lines against square glass, upraised arms, bent, down-folded, against sunset red and golded. Come to me, warm arms of my lass, for me, the warm arms
It's
of
a
my
bubble
lass.
hash now.
The singer stopped, reached out a bandaged arm, and closed the eyelids of the man on the litter. Halleck drew a final soft chord from the balisette, thinking, now we are 73.
Family life of the Royal Creche is difficult for many people to understand, but I shall try to give you a capsule view of it. My father had only one real friend, I think. That was Count Casimir Fenring, the genetic eunuch, and one of the deadliest fighters in the Imperium. The Count, a dapper and ugly little man, brought a new slave concubine to my father one day, and I was dispatched by my mother to spy on the proceedings. All of us spied on my father as a matter of self-protection. One of the slave concubines permitted my father, under the Bene Gesserit Guild agreement, could not, of course, bear a royal successor. But the intrigues were constant and oppressive in their similarity. We became adept, my mother and sisters and I, at avoiding subtle instruments of death. It may seem a dreadful thing to say, but I'm not at all sure my father was innocent in all these attempts. A royal family is not like other families. Here was a new slave concubine, then, red-haired like my father, willowy and graceful. She had a dancer's muscles, and her training obviously had included neuro-enticement. My father looked at her for a long time as she postured unclothed before him. Finally, he said, "She is too beautiful. We will save her as a gift." You have no idea how much consternation this restraint created in the Royal Creche. Subtlety and self-control were, after all, the most deadly threats to us all. In my father's house, by the Princess Irulan.
Paul stood outside the still tent in the late afternoon. The crevasse where he had pitched their camp lay in deep shadow. He stared out across the open sand of the distant cliff, wondering if he should waken his mother, who lay asleep in the tent. Folds upon folds of dunes spread beyond their shelter. Away from the setting sun, the dunes exposed greased shadows so black they were like bits of night. And the flatness. His mind searched for something tall in that landscape. But there was no persuading tallness out of heat-addled air and that horizon. No bloom or gently shaken thing to mark the passage of a breeze. Only dunes and that distant cliff beneath a sky of burnished silver blue. What if there isn't one of the abandoned testing stations across there? He wondered. What if there are no Fremen either, and the plants we see are only an accident? Within the tent, Jessica awakened, turned onto her back and peered sidelong out the transparent end at Paul. He stood with his back to her, and something about his stance reminded her of his father. She sensed the well of grief rising within her and turned away. Presently she adjusted her stillsuit, refreshed herself with water from the tent's catch pocket, and slipped out to stand and stretch the sleep from her muscles. Paul spoke without turning. I find myself enjoying the quiet here. How the mind gears itself for its environment, she thought, and she recalled a Bene Gesserit axiom. The mind can go either direction under stress, toward positive or toward negative, on or off. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconsciousness at the negative end and hyperconsciousness at the positive end. The way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training. It could be a good life here, Paul said. She tried to see the desert through his eyes, seeking to encompass all the rigors this planet accepted as commonplace, wondering at the possible futures Paul had glimpsed. One could be alone out here, she thought, without fear of someone behind you, without fear of the hunter. She stepped past Paul, lifted her binoculars, adjusted the oil lenses, and studied the escarpment across from her. Yes, saguaro in the arroyos, and other spiny growth, and a matting of low grasses, yellow-green in the shadows. I'll strike camp, Paul said. Jessica nodded, walked to the fisher's mouth where she could get a sweep of the desert, and swung her binoculars to the left. A salt pan glared white there with a blending of dirty tan at its edges. A field of white out there where white was death. But the pan said another thing. Water. At some time, water had flowed across that glaring white. She lowered her binoculars, adjusted her burnous, listened for a moment to the sound of Paul's movements. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the salt pan. Lines of wild color spread over the sunset horizon. Color streamed into a toe of darkness, testing the sand. Coal-colored shadows spread, and a thick collapse of night blotted the desert. Stars. She stared up at them, sensing Paul's movements as he came up beside her. The desert night focused upward, with a feeling of lift toward the stars. The weight of the day receded. There came a brief flurry of breeze across her face. The first moon will be up soon, Paul said. The pack's ready. I planted the thumper. We could be lost forever in this hell place, she thought, and no one to know. The night wind spread sand runnels that grated across her face, bringing the smell of cinnamon, a shower of odors in the dark. Smell that, Paul said. I can smell it even through the filter, she said. Riches. But will it buy water? She pointed across the basin. There are no artificial lights across there. Fremen would be hidden in a sietch behind those rocks, he said. A sill of silver pushed above the horizon to their right, the first moon. It lifted into view, the hand pattern plain on its face. Jessica studied the white silver of sand exposed in the light. I planted the thumper in the deepest part of the crevasse, Paul said. Whenever I light its candle, it'll give us about 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Before it starts calling a worm. Oh, I'm ready to go. He slipped away from her side, and she heard his progress back up their fissure. The night is a tunnel, she thought. A hole into tomorrow. If we're to have a tomorrow. She shook her head. Why must I be so morbid? I was trained better than that. Paul returned, took up the pack, led the way down to the first spreading dune where he stopped and listened as his mother came up behind him. He heard her soft progress and the cold, single-grain dribbles of sound, the desert's own code spelling out its measure of safety. We must walk without rhythm, Paul said, and he called up memory of men walking the sand, both prescient memory and real memory. Watch how I do it, he said. This is how Fremen walk the sand. He stepped out onto the windward face of the dune, following the curve of it, moved with a dragging pace. Jessica studied his progress for 10 steps, followed, imitating him. She saw the sense of it. They must sound like the natural shifting of sand, like the wind. But muscles protested this unnatural, broken pattern. Step, drag, drag, step, step, wait, drag, step. Time stretched out around them. The rock face ahead seemed to grow no nearer. The one behind still towered high. Lump, 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 lump. It was a drumming from the cliff behind. The thumper, Paul hissed. Its pounding continued, and they found difficulty avoiding the rhythm of it in their stride. Lump, 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 lump. They moved in a moonlit bowl punctured by that hollowed thumping, down and up through spilling dunes, step, drag, wait, step, across pea sand that rolled under their feet, drag, wait, step. And all the while their ears searched for a special hissing. The sound, when it came, started so low that their own dragging passage masked it, but it grew louder and louder out of the west. Lump, 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 drummed the thumper. The hissing approach spread across the night behind them. They turned their heads as they walked, saw the mound of the coursing worm. Keep moving, Paul whispered. Don't look back. A grating sound of fury exploded from the rock shadows they had left. It was a flailing avalanche of noise. Keep moving, Paul repeating. He saw that they had reached an unmarked point where the two rock faces, the one ahead and the one behind, appeared equally remote. And still behind them, that whipping, frenzied tearing of rocks dominated the night. They moved on, and on, and on. Muscles reached a stage of mechanical aching that seemed to stretch out indefinitely, but Paul saw that the beckoning escarpment ahead of them had climbed higher. Jessica moved in a void of concentration, aware that the pressure of her will alone kept her walking. Dryness ached in her mouth, but the sounds behind drove away all hope of stopping for a sip from her still-suit's catch pockets. Lump, lump. Renewed frenzy erupted from the distant cliff, drowning out the thumper. Silence. Faster, Paul whispered. She nodded, knowing he did not see the gesture, but needing the action to tell herself that it was necessary to demand even more from muscles that already were being taxed to their limits. The unnatural movement. The rock face of safety ahead of them climbed into the stars, and Paul saw a plain of flat sand stretching out at the base. He stepped onto it, stumbled in his fatigue, righted himself with an involuntary out-thrusting of a foot. Resonant booming shook the sand around them. Paul lurched sideways 2 steps. Boom! Boom! Drum sand! Jessica hissed. Paul recovered his balance. A sweeping glance took in the sand around them, the rock escarpment perhaps 200 meters away. Behind them, he heard a hissing, like the wind, like a riptide where there was no water. "Run!" Jessica screamed. "Paul, run!" They ran. Drum sound boomed beneath their feet. Then they were out of it and into pea gravel. For a time, the running was a relief to muscles that ached from unfamiliar, rhythmless use. Here was action that could be understood. Here was rhythm. But sand and gravel dragged at their feet, and the hissing approach of the worm was storm sound that grew around them. Jessica stumbled to her knees. All she could think of was the fatigue and the sound and the terror. Paul dragged her up. They ran on, hand in hand. A thin pole jutted from the sand ahead of them. They passed it, saw another. Jessica's mind failed to register on the poles until they were past. There was another wind-etched surface thrust up from a crack in rock. Another rock. She felt it through her feet. The shock of unresisting surface gained new strength from the firmer footing. A deep crack stretched its vertical shadow upward into the cliff ahead of them. They sprinted for it, crowded into the narrow hole. Behind them, the sound of the worm's passage stopped. Jessica and Paul turned, peered out onto the desert. Where the dunes began, perhaps 50 meters away at the foot of a rock beach, a silver-grey curve broached from the desert, sending rivers of sand and dust cascading all around. It lifted higher, resolved into a giant, questing mouth. It was a round, black hole with edges glistening in the moonlight. The mouth snaked toward the narrow crack where Paul and Jessica huddled. Cinnamon yelled in their nostrils. Moonlight flashed from crystal teeth. Back and forth the great mouth wove. Paul stilled his breathing. Jessica crouched, staring. It took intense concentration of her Bene Gesserit training to put down the primal terrors, subduing a race memory fear that threatened to fill her mind. Paul felt a kind of elation. In some recent instant, he had crossed a time barrier into more unknown territory. He could sense the darkness ahead, nothing revealed to his inner eye. It was as though some step he had taken had plunged him into a well, or into the trough of a wave where the future was invisible. The landscape had undergone a profound shifting. Instead of frightening him, the sensation of time darkness forced a hyper-acceleration of his other senses. He found himself registering every available aspect of the thing that lifted from the sand there, seeking him. Its mouth was some 80 meters in diameter. Crystal teeth with the curved shape of crysknives glinting around the rim. The bellows breath of cinnamon, subtle aldehydes, acids. The worm blotted out the moonlight as it brushed the rocks above them. A shower of small stones and sand cascaded into the narrow hiding place. Paul crowded his mother farther back. Cinnamon. The smell of it flooded across him. What has the worm to do with a spice melange? He asked himself. And he remembered Liet Kynes betraying a veiled reference to some association between worm and spice. Baroom! It was like a peal of dry thunder coming from far off to their right. Again, baroom! The worm drew back onto the sand, lay there momentarily, its crystal teeth weaving moon flashes. Lump, 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 lump. Another thumper, Paul thought. Again it sounded off to their right. A shudder passed through the worm. It drew farther away into the sand. Only a mounded upper curve remained, like half a bell mouth, the curve of a tunnel rearing above the dunes. Sand rasped. The creature sank farther, retreating, turning. It became a mound of cresting sand that curved away through a saddle in the dunes. Paul stepped out of the crack, watched the sand wave recede across the waste toward the new thumper summons. Jessica followed, listening. Lump, 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 lump. Presently the sound stopped. Paul found the tube into his stillsuit, sipped at the reclaimed water. Jessica focused on his action, but her mind felt blank with fatigue and the aftermath of terror. "Has it gone for sure?" she whispered. "Somebody called it," Paul said. "Fremen." She felt herself recovering. "It was so big. Not as big as the one that got our thopter. Are you sure it was Fremen? They used a thumper. Why would they help us? Maybe they weren't helping us. Maybe they were just calling a worm. Why?" An answer lay poised at the edge of his awareness, but refused to come. He had a vision in his mind of something to do with the telescoping barbed sticks in their packs, the maker hooks. "Why would they call a worm?" Jessica asked. A breath of fear touched his mind, and he forced himself to turn away from his mother, to look up the cliff. "We'd better find a way up there before daylight," he pointed. "Those poles we passed. There are more of them." She looked, following the line of his hand, saw the poles, wind-scratched markers, made out the shadow of a narrow ledge that twisted into a crevasse high above them. "They mark a way up the cliff," Paul said. He settled his shoulders into the pack, crossed to the foot of the ledge, and began the climb upward. Jessica waited a moment, resting, restoring her strength. Then she followed. Up they climbed, following the guide poles until the ledge dwindled to a narrow lip at the mouth of a dark crevasse. Paul tipped his head to peer into the shadowed place. He could feel the precarious hold his feet had on the slender ledge, but forced himself to slow caution. He saw only darkness within the crevasse. It stretched away upward, open to the stars at the top. His ears searched, found only sounds he could expect: a tiny spill of sand, an insect burr, the patter of a small running creature. He tested the darkness in the crevasse with one foot, found rock beneath a gritting surface. Slowly he inched around the corner, signaled for his mother to follow. He grasped the loose edge of her robe, helped her around. They looked upward at starlight framed by two rock lips. Paul saw his mother beside him as a cloudy grey movement. "If we could only risk a light," he whispered. "We have other senses than eyes," she said. Paul slid a foot forward, shifted his weight, and probed with the other foot, met an obstruction. He lifted his foot, found a step, pulled himself up onto it. He reached back, felt his mother's arm, tugged at her robe for her to follow. Another step. "It goes on up to the top, I think," he whispered. Shallow and even steps, Jessica thought. Man-carved beyond a doubt. She followed the shadowy movement of Paul's progress, feeling out the steps. Rock walls narrowed until her shoulders almost brushed them. The steps ended in a slitted defile about 20 meters long, its floor level, and this opened onto a shallow, moonlit basin. Paul stepped out into the rim of the basin, whispered, "What a beautiful place." Jessica could only stare in silent agreement from her position a step behind him. In spite of weariness, the irritation of recaths and nose plugs and the confinement of the still suit, in spite of fear and the aching desire for rest, this basin's beauty filled her senses, forcing her to stop and admire it. "Like a fairyland," Paul whispered. Jessica nodded. Spreading away in front of her stretched desert growth, bushes, cacti, tiny clumps of leaves, all trembling in the moonlight. The ring walls were dark to her left, moon-frosted on her right. "This must be a Fremen place," Paul said. "There would have to be people for this many plants to survive," she agreed. She uncapped the tube to her stillsuit's catch pockets, sipped at it. Warm, faintly acrid wetness slipped down her throat. She marked how it refreshed her. The tube's cap grated against flakes of sand as she replaced it. Movement caught Paul's attention, to his right and down on the basin floor, curving out beneath them. He stared down through smoke bushes and weeds into a wedged slab sand surface of moonlight, inhabited by an up-hop, jump, pop-hop of tiny motion. "Mice," he hissed. Pop-hop-hop they went, into shadows and out. Something fell soundlessly past their eyes into the mice. There came a thin screech, a flapping of wings, and a ghostly grey bird lifted away, across the basin, with a small dark shadow in its talons. We need that reminder, Jessica thought. Paul continued to stare across the basin. He inhaled, sensed the softly cutting contralto smell of sage climbing the night. The predatory bird. He thought of it as the way of this desert. It had brought a stillness to the basin so unuttered that the blue milk moonlight could almost be heard flowing across sentinel saguaro and spiked paint bush. There was a low humming of light here, more basic in its harmony than any other music in his universe. "We'd better find a place to pitch the tent," he said. "Tomorrow we can try to find the Fremen who—" "Most intruders here regret finding the Fremen." It was a heavy, masculine voice chopping across his words, shattering the moment. The voice came from above them and to their right. "Please do not run, intruders," the voice said as Paul made to withdraw into the defile. "If you run, you'll only waste your body's water." They want us for the water of our flesh, Jessica thought. Her muscles overrode all fatigue, flowed into maximum readiness without external betrayal. She pinpointed the location of the voice, thinking, such stealth. I didn't hear him. And she realized that the owner of that voice had permitted himself only the small sounds, the natural sounds of the desert. Another voice called from the basin's rim to their left.
Won't be that much longer.
"Make it quick, still. Get their water and let's be on our way. We've little enough time before dawn." Hall, less conditioned to emergency response than his mother, felt chagrin that he had stiffened and tried to withdraw, that he had clouded his abilities by a momentary panic. He forced himself now to obey her teachings. Relax, then fall into the semblance of relaxation, then into the arrested whip-snap of muscles that can slash in any direction. Still, he felt the edge of fear within him and knew its source. This was blind time, no future he had seen. And they were caught between wild Fremen, whose only interest was the water carried in the flesh of two unshielded bodies.
This Fremen religious adaptation, then, is the source of what we now recognize as the pillars of the universe, whose Krizara Tafwid are among us all with signs and proofs and prophecy. They bring us the Arakeen mystical fusion, whose profound beauty is typified by the stirring music built on the old forms, but stamped with the new awakening. Who has not heard and been deeply moved by the old man's hymn? I drove my feet through a desert, whose mirage fluttered like a host. Voracious for glory, greedy for danger, I roamed the horizons of Al-Kulab, watching time-level mountains in its search and its hunger for me. And I saw the sparrows swiftly approach, bolder than the onrushing wolf. They spread in the tree of my youth. I heard the flock in my branches, and was caught on their beaks and claws. From Arrakis Awakening by the Princess Irulan.
The man crawled across a dune top. He was a mote caught in the glare of the noon sun. He was dressed only in torn remnants of a jubbo cloak, his skin bare to the heat through the tatters. The hood had been ripped from the cloak, but the man had fashioned a turban from a torn strip of cloth. Wisps of sandy hair protruded from it, matched by a sparse beard and thick brows. Beneath the blue within blue eyes, remains of a dark stain spread down to his cheeks. A matted depression across mustache and beard showed where a still-suit tube had marked out its path from nose to catch pockets. The man stopped half across the dune crest, arms stretched down the slip face. Blood had clotted on his back and on his arms and legs. Patches of yellow-grey sand clung to the wounds. Slowly, he brought his hands under him, pushed himself to his feet, stood there swaying. And even in this almost random action, there remained a trace of once precise movement.
I am Liet Kynes. I am His Imperial Majesty's planetologist. Planetary ecologist for Arrakis. I am steward of this land.
He stumbled, fell sideways along the crusty surface of the windward face, his hands dug feebly into the sand. I am steward of this sand, he thought. He realized that he was semi-delirious, that he should dig himself into the sand, find the relatively cool underlayer and cover himself with it. But he could still smell the rank, semi-sweet esters of a pre-spice pocket somewhere underneath this sand. He knew the peril within this fact more certainly than any other Fremen. If he could smell the pre-spice mass, that meant the gases deep under the sand were nearing explosive pressure. He had to get away from here. His hands made weak, scrabbling motions along the dune face. A thought spread across his mind, clear, distinct. The real wealth of a planet is in its landscape, how we take part in that basic source of civilization, agriculture. And he thought how strange it was that the mind, long fixed on a single track, could not get off that track. The Harkonnen troopers had left him here without water or still suit, thinking a worm would get him if the desert didn't. They had thought it amusing to leave him alive, to die by inches at the impersonal hands of his planet. The Harkonnens always did find it difficult to kill Fremen, he thought. We won't die easily. I should be dead now. I will be dead soon. But I can't stop being an ecologist.
The highest function of ecology is understanding consequences.
The voice shocked him because he recognized it and knew the owner of it was dead. It was the voice of his father, who had been planetologist here before him. His father long dead, killed in the cave-in at Plaster Basin.
Got yourself into quite a fix here, son. You should have known the consequences of trying to help the child of that duke.
I'm delirious, Kynes thought. The voice seemed to come from his right. Kynes scraped his face through sand, turning to look in that direction. Nothing except a curving stretch of dune dancing with heat devils in the full glare of the sun.
The more life there is within a system, the more niches there are for life.
The voice came now from his left, from behind him. Why does he keep moving around? Kynes asked himself. Doesn't he want me to see him?
Life improves the capacity of the environment to sustain life. Life makes needed nutrients more readily available. It binds more energy into the system through the tremendous chemical interplay from organism to organism.
Why does he keep harping on the same subject? Kynes asked himself. I knew that before I was 10. Desert hawks, carrion eaters in this land, as were most wild creatures, began to circle over him. Kynes saw a shadow pass near his hand, forced his head farther around to look upward. The birds were a blurred patch on silver-blue sky, distant flecks of soot floating above him.
We are generalists. You can't draw neat lines around planet-wide problems. Planetology is a cut-and-fit science.
What's he trying to tell me? Kynes wondered. Is there some consequence I failed to see? His cheek slumped back against the hot sand, and he smelled the burned rock odor beneath the pre-spice gases. From some corner of logic in his mind, a thought formed. Those are carrion-eater birds over me. Perhaps some of my Fremen will see them and come to investigate.
To the working planetologist, his most important tool is human beings. You must cultivate ecological literacy among the people. That's why I've created this entirely new form of ecological notation.
He's repeating things he said to me when I was a child, Kynes thought. He began to feel cool, but that corner of logic in his mind told him, the sun is overhead. You have no still suit, and you're hot. The sun is burning the moisture out of your body. His fingers clawed feebly at the sand. They couldn't even leave me a still suit.
The presence of moisture in the air helps prevent too rapid evaporation from living bodies.
Why does he keep repeating the obvious? Kynes wondered. He tried to think of moisture in the air, grass covering this dune, open water somewhere beneath him, a long qanat, flowing with water open to the sky except in text illustrations. Open water, irrigation water. It took 5,000 cubic meters of water to irrigate 1 hectare of land per growing season, he remembered.
Our first goal on Arrakis is grassland provinces. We will start with these mutated poverty grasses. When we have moisture locked in grasslands, we'll move on to start upland forests. Then a few open bodies of water, small at first, and situated along lines of prevailing winds with wind-trapped moisture precipitators spaced in the lines to recapture what the wind steals. We must create a true sirocco, a moist wind, but we will never get away from the necessity for wind traps.
Always lecturing me, Kynes thought. Why doesn't he shut up? Can't he see I'm dying?
You will die too if you don't get off the bubble that's forming right now deep underneath you. It's there and you know it. You can smell the pre-spice gases. You know the little makers are beginning to lose some of their water into the mass.
The thought of that water beneath him was maddening. He imagined it now, sealed off in strata of porous rock by the leathery half-plant, half-animal little makers, and the thin rupture that was pouring a cool stream of clearest, pure, liquid, soothing water into a pre-spice mass. He inhaled, smelling the rank sweetness. The odor was much richer around him than it had been. Kynes pushed himself to his knees, heard a bird screech, the hurried flapping of wings. This is a spice desert, he thought. There must be Fremen about even in the day sun. Surely they can see the birds, and will investigate.
Movement across the landscape is a necessity for animal life. Nomad peoples follow the same necessity. Lines of movement adjust to physical needs for water, food, minerals. We must control this movement now. Align it for our purposes.
Shut up, old man.
We must do a thing on Arrakis never before attempted for an entire planet. We must use man as a constructive ecological force, inserting adapted terraform life, a plant here, an animal there, a man in that place, to transform the water cycle, to build a new kind of landscape.
Shut up!
It was lines of movement that gave us the first clue to the relationship between worms and spice.
A worm, Kynes thought, with a surge of hope. A maker's sure to come when this bubble bursts. But I have no hooks. How can I mount a big maker without hooks? He could feel frustration sapping what little strength remained to him. Water so near, only 100 meters or so beneath him. A worm sure to come, but no way to trap it on the surface and use it. Kynes pitched forward onto the sand, returning to the shallow depression his movements had defined. He felt sand hot against his left cheek, but the sensation was remote.
The Arakeen environment built itself into the evolutionary pattern of native life forms. How strange that so few people ever looked up from the spice long enough to wonder at the near-ideal nitrogen-oxygen-CO2 balance being maintained here in the absence of large areas of plant cover. The energy sphere of the planet is there to see and understand. A relentless process, but a process nonetheless. There is a gap in it, then something occupies that gap. Science is made up of so many things that appear obvious after they are explained. I knew the little maker was there, deep in the sand, long before I ever saw it.
Please stop lecturing me, Father.
A hawk landed on the sand near his outstretched hand. Kynes saw it fold its wings, tip its head to stare at him. He summoned the energy to croak at it. The bird hopped away 2 steps, but continued to stare at him.
Men and their works have been a disease on the surface of their planets before now. Nature tends to compensate for diseases, to remove or encapsulate them, to incorporate them into the system in her own way.
The hawk lowered its head, stretched its wings, refolded them. It transferred its attention to his outstretched hand. Kynes found that he no longer had the strength to croak at it.
The historical system of mutual pillage and extortion stops here on Arrakis. For stealing what you need without regard to those who come after. The physical qualities of a planet are written into its economic and political record. We have the record in front of us, and our course is obvious.
He never could stop lecturing, Kynes thought. Lecturing, 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 always lecturing. The hawk hopped 1 step closer to Kynes's outstretched hand, turned its head first one way and then the other to study the exposed flesh.
Arrakis is a one-crop planet. One crop. It supports a ruling class that lives as ruling classes have lived in all times, while beneath them a semi-human mass of semi-slaves exists on the leavings. It's the masses and the leavings that occupy our attention. Far more valuable than has ever been
Speaker's about to
suspected.
go out. Or go dead.
I'm ignoring you, Father. Go away.
And he thought, surely there must be some of my Fremen near. They cannot help but see the birds over me. They will investigate, if only to see if there's moisture available.
The masses of Arrakis will know that we work to make the land flow with water. Most of them, of course, will have only a semi-mystical understanding of how we intend to do this. Many, not understanding the prohibitive mass ratio problem, may even think we'll bring water from some other planet rich in it. Let them think anything they wish, as long as they believe in us.
In a minute, I'll get up and tell him what I think of him, Kynes thought. Standing there lecturing me when he should be helping me. The bird took another stretched hand. 2 more hawks drifted down to the sand behind it.
Religion and law among our masses must be one and the same. An act of disobedience must be a sin and require religious penalties. This will have the dual benefit of bringing both greater obedience and greater bravery. We must depend not so much on the bravery of individuals, you see, as upon the bravery of a whole population.
Where is my population now, when I need it most? Kynes thought. He summoned all his strength, moved his hand a finger's width toward the nearest hawk. It hopped backward among its companions, and all stood poised for flight.
Our timetable will achieve the stature of a natural phenomenon. A planet's life is a woven fabric. Vegetation and animal changes will be determined, at first, by the raw physical forces we manipulate. As they establish themselves, though, our changes will become controlling influences in their own right, and we will have to deal with them, too. Keep in mind, though, that we need control only 3% of the energy's surface. Only 3%. To tip the entire structure over into our self-sustaining system.
Why aren't you helping me? Kynes wondered. Always the same. When I need you most, you fail me. He wanted to turn his head, to stare in the direction of his father's voice, stare the old man down. Muscles refused to answer his demand. Moved. It approached his hand, a cautious step at a time, while its companions waited in mock indifference. The hawk stopped only a hop away from his hand. A profound clarity filled Kynes' mind. He saw quite suddenly a potential for Arrakis that his father had never seen. The possibilities along that different path flooded through him.
No more terrible disaster could befall your people than for them to fall into the hands of a hero.
Reading my mind, Kynes thought. Well, let him. The messages already have been sent to my Sietch villages. Nothing can stop them. If the Duke's son is alive, they'll find him and protect him as I have commanded. They may discard the woman, his mother, but they'll save the boy. One hop that brought it within slashing distance of his hand. It tipped its head to examine the supine flesh. Abruptly, it straightened, stretched its head upward, and with a single screech, leaped into the air and banked away overhead with its companions behind it. They've come, Kynes thought. My Fremen have found me. Then he heard the sand rumbling. Every Fremen knew the sound, could distinguish it immediately from the noises of worms or other desert life. Somewhere beneath him, the pre-spice mass had accumulated enough water and organic matter from the little makers, had reached the critical stage of wild growth. A gigantic bubble of carbon dioxide was forming deep in the sand, heaving upward in an enormous blow, with a dust whirlpool at its center. It had been formed deep in the sand for whatever lay on the surface. The hawks circled overhead, screeching their frustration. They knew what was happening. Any desert creature would know. And I am a desert creature, Kynes thought. You see me, Father? I am a desert creature. He felt the bubble lift him, felt it break, and the dust whirlpool engulf him, dragging him down into cool darkness. For a moment, the sensation of coolness and the moisture were blessed relief. Then, as his planet killed him, it occurred to Kynes that his father and all the other scientists were wrong, that the most persistent principles of the universe were accident and error. Even the hawks could appreciate these facts.
Prophecy and prescience. How can they be put to the test in the
It's
face
still
of the
going,
unanswered question? Consider, how much is actual prediction of the waveform, as Muad'Dib referred to his vision image, and how much is the prophet shaping the future to fit the prophecy? What of the harmonics inherent in the act of prophecy? Does the prophet see the future, or does he see a line of weakness, a fault, or cleavage that he may shatter with words or decisions, as a diamond cutter shatters his gem with the blow of a knife? Private Reflections on Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
Get their water, the man calling out of the night had said. And Paul fought down his fear, glanced at his mother. His trained eyes saw her readiness for battle, the waiting whip-snap of her muscles. It would be regrettable. Out of hand, the voice above them said. That's the one who spoke to us first, Jessica thought. There are at least two of them. One to our right, and one on our left. Signoro robosa sucaris in mange la chagavas, doi me camavas, na beslas lele padrobas. It was the man to their right, calling out across the basin. To Paul, the words were gibberish, but out of her Bene Gesserit training, Jessica recognized the speech. It was Chakobsa, one of the ancient hunting languages, and the man above them was saying that perhaps these were the strangers they sought. In the sudden silence that followed the calling voice, the hoop-wheel face of the second moon, faintly ivory blue, rolled over the rocks across the basin, bright and peering. Scrambling sounds came from the rocks above and to both sides, dark motions in the moonlight. Paul thought with a sudden pang. A tall man in a mottled burnous stepped in front of Jessica. His mouth baffle was thrown aside for clear speech, revealing a heavy beard in the side light of the moon, but face and eyes were hidden in the overhang of his hood. "What have we here? Jinn or human?" he asked. When Jessica heard the true banter in his voice, she allowed herself a faint hope. This was the voice of command, the voice that had first shocked them with its intrusion from the night. "Human, I warrant," the man said. Jessica sensed, rather than saw, the knife hidden in a fold of the man's robe. She permitted herself one bitter regret that she and Paul had no shields. "Do you also speak?" the man asked. Jessica put all the royal arrogance at her command into her manner and... But she had not heard enough of this man to be certain she had a register on his culture and weaknesses. "Who comes on us like criminals out of the night?" she demanded. The burnous hooded head shook.
Alright, everyone, I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. Excuse me. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who continues to stop by. And I appreciate all y'all's support. And until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.